Okay, today I'm going over the study guide for the second part of Chapter 6. Um, and I will let you know that the test will be exactly like this. Same number of questions, same order, same directions. So that is one thing you got to pay attention to when you're going through. What do the directions say? So this first part says use factoring to solve. That means you have to factor each problem. And when you're doing that, for the most part, factoring means that you always want to set um, the equation equal to zero. So if you don't have everything all on one side, you got to remember to do that. Okay? So first off, when we factor a problem, we look at this and we know that a is equal to 1, b is equal to 7, and c is equal to negative 18. So we do a times c, and that is negative 18. And so I'm going to list my factors of 18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. And if I have a negative number, that I know that I'm looking to subtract these numbers to get to my b term. Okay? And my b is 7. So if I subtract 9 and 2, I get 7. It's positive 7, so I know that the 9 is positive and the 2 is negative. And that means that we said that would be x squared minus 2x plus 9x minus 18 equals 0. And then we grouped these two. So we take out an x. That leaves me with x minus 2. And then I always carry down that sign the same. And then these two have a factor of 9. And I've always told you just to write the same factor because if it's not the same factor, you can't keep going. So, and then check it. 9 times x is 9x. 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. So we're good. And here is the factor x minus 2, and what's left is x plus 9. And then to solve it, remember when you, all of these are equations, so when you finish, your answer is going to be x equals. Okay, so I'm going to set each factor equal to 0, x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 9 equals 0, and then I'm adding 2 to both sides, so x equals 2. And over here, I'm going to subtract 9, and so I'm going to have x equals negative 9. So I just put 2 and negative 9. Okay? So on this next one, got to set it equal to 0, so I'm going to take the 7x to the other side, which means that I will be subtracting it, and that's going to give me 16x squared minus 7x equals 0. When you have two terms, there's only two ways to factor. One is with a GCF, which you're always supposed to look for first. So these both, the 16 and 7 don't have anything in common, but the x does. There's an x in both of them. So if I take the x out, I'm left with 16x minus 7, and that's equal to 0. So again, we set each factor equal to 0. X equals 0. 16x minus 7 equals 0. Now I'm solving for just x, so I'm going to take that 7 to the other side. 16x equals 7, and then I'm going to divide both sides by 16. So my two answers are x equals 0 or 7/16. Okay? The next one, again, got to bring my number over to the other side. So if it's negative, I'm going to add it to get there. So x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 0. Okay? Now this one, if you recognize that x squared is a perfect square and 16, this is what we have referred to as a PST. And so it factors to x plus 4 squared. Always takes that sign, and the square root of 16 is 4. The middle term is x times 4 times 2, which of course is 8x. And so again, I set the factor equal to 0. It's the same factor twice, so I don't need to do both of them. I just do one. Subtract 4, so x is going to equal negative 4. You do not write the same answer twice. So if, yes, it happens twice, but you only write it once. Okay? And when I'm going through these, y'all, if you have a question, pause your video. Please come and ask me. Okay? Or if you don't understand what you've done wrong or what got marked wrong, then you need to pause the video and come see me. Okay, so this next one, two squares, as I said, if you have two terms, excuse me, you look for a GCF. There is no GCF, but this is a perfect square and that's a perfect square. So this factors to x minus 9 times x plus 9 equal to 0. And so you have learned another way to solve that problem, but if it's in the directions of factoring, you need to make sure that you show me this step, okay? So all of these, I'll go highlight at the end as what the minimum step that you have to show me to satisfy that you're factoring the problem, okay? Um, x minus 9 equals 0, x plus 9 equals 0. So I'm going to add 9. Of course, that means x equals 9, and this is x equals negative 9. And when you write that, we've talked about you can write just plus or minus 9 in the blank. Okay, so to show your work to support that, when you are factoring, this is the minimum step that you must show me, okay, of how to factor the problem. So if you don't have that step in there, okay, then you're going to lose points. So please make sure you do that when you do the factoring section. Okay, this next one is our square root property. Okay, and our square root property, we are first isolating our x squared. So this time we're going to divide by 5 first. And so x squared equals 75 divided by 5, which is 15. Okay, and when you take the square root of both sides, then x equals plus or minus the square root of 15. Okay, put it in your calculator. If you get a decimal number, leave it. Okay, um, the only factors of 15 are 3 and 5. Neither one of those are perfect squares, so that means x equals plus or minus 15. Okay, um, we've talked about what our perfect squares are, so if you need to remember what they are and how to get them, then please come see me. Okay, x plus 3 quantity squared equals 17. My squared term is by itself, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. Okay, there is no perfect square factor in here, so I just have to subtract 3 from both sides. Okay, and when you do that, we generally write that term first. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write it. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 17. And you're done with that. Okay, this next one is your quadratic formula. And so I want to make sure that when you do this, you might be able to do it another way, but you must do the quadratic formula and show me that you know how to use it. So this first one, to help so that I make sure you know what you're doing, write down what A equals, B, and C, and then you're going to plug it in. Let's see, what is our quadratic formula? X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so x equals, I'm going to put my long, this is another thing that a lot of people are only putting this line underneath the radical part. You must make sure that all of it, I marked it on your homework if you didn't have it correctly. You will lose points because it's a different answer if you don't put that fraction bar line all the way across. Okay, so we have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 9 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, excuse me for 1 second. Okay, continuing with that. So you get out your calculator, and what I think you ought to show, I've had some people that are having trouble putting this in. So to be on the safe side when you do it, and you should be putting this in your calculator and making sure that you know how to use it. 9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 14 is equal to 25 all over 2. Okay, so if I continue, x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5 over 2. And so that's negative 9. Actually, we've talked about that, so I'm going to go 2 bear. Okay. Uh, Negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4 over 2, and negative 9 minus 5 is negative 14 over 2. So that makes my answers x equal negative 4 over 2 is negative 2, and negative 14 over 2 is negative 7. Okay, so that's how you show the work, and the minimum, well, we'll come back as I finish that one, and I'll show you what that minimum work is. Did I do that up here? You're showing. I don't think you'll do it another way. Okay, so moving along. The next one, again, write down a equals 1, b equals 5, c equals negative 2. So x equals the opposite of b, negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a. And remember when I taught this lesson, I told you that you always need to remember to put your negatives in parentheses because so you don't mess up your calculations. Okay, so x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, and I'm putting that in my calculator. When I do that, y'all, you're not putting the radical, you're just putting those numbers in your calculator. So this is 5 squared minus a negative 8, which is 5 squared plus 8, and 5 squared plus 8, of course, is 33. So that means, and there's nothing, that's 3 times 11, it cannot be simplified. So x equals, you just write it like that, negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2, and you're good. So when you're solving by quadratic formula, this is what you got to make sure you show me on your paper, okay? So there has to be some work to support your answer. Okay, next. You have 3 problems that you get to solve by the method of your choice, okay? So when you're looking at this, okay, uh, A is 3, B is negative 20, C is negative 7. So A times C is negative 21. The factors of 21 are 1 and 21, 3 and 7. And it's negative, so I'm looking to subtract. 21 minus 1 is 20, which was my middle number. But I need it negative 20, so my 21 is going to be negative. So I'm going to split it up. It's going to be 3x squared plus x minus 21x minus 7 equals 0. And I'm looking at what these have in common and that has in common. So that gives me x times 3x plus 1. Always takes that sign, and these two have a 7 in common, leaving me with 3x plus 1. Now, if you're confused at all, it says minus and it's a plus, but whenever you take out a negative, it always changes the sign. So you check it. Negative 7 times 3x is negative 21x. Negative 7 times 1 is negative 7. So we have our common factors, 3x plus 1, so I pull that out, leaving me with x minus 7. And then I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. 3x plus 1 equals 0. X minus 7 equals 0. I take the 1 over by subtracting, so 3x equals negative 1. And then I'm going to divide by 3. So I was running out of room a little bit. So x, the first one is x equals negative 1/3. And then to get this over, I'm going to add, so that's going to be x equals 7. Okay? All right, number 10. I'm again always going to bring things over if I have 3 terms. So it's going to be 4x squared plus 10x. That negative 2, to get it to the other side, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Okay? And a equals 4, b equals 10, and c equals 2. So if I come over and I say a times c is 8, and the factors of 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4, and I'm trying to add them together to get 10. 8 plus 1 is 9, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So that means it doesn't factor. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, so that gives me x equals negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus, what is that, 4 times 8 is 32. So 100 minus 32 is 68 over 8. Um, Now, you got to keep going. 68 happens to be 4 times 17. Okay, so x equals negative 10 plus or minus. That's a perfect square. So I take it out. The square root of 4 is 2, leaving me with 17 all over 8. And if you look at all three of those numbers, 2 goes into them. Okay? 2 goes in there 1 time, 2 goes into 10 5 times, and 2 goes into 10 4 times. Excuse me, 2 goes into 8 4 times. So my answer is x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 4. Now, I think that's the way most of y'all would do it, but let me show you something else, okay? What you're always, always, always supposed to do, let me, I don't know if I can make this smaller or not. Let me see. Boom, boom. Give myself some more room here. I'm going to group it. And he didn't want to be grouped. Okay, let me just go. So, what you're always supposed to do, okay, so I just want to show you the difference, is if you come over here and you'd realize that there's a common factor of 2 in everything here, so you divide everything by 2. That would give you 2x squared plus 5x plus 1 equals 0. Now, you go through the same process, you'll find out that it doesn't factor. But when you put it in your quadratic formula, the nice thing about it is x equals negative b, which is negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And when you simplify that, you will already be here and you won't have to do this step of simplifying. So that's the advantage of finding that GCF first. But I wanted to show you both of them so you could see, hey, it might be worthwhile to find that GCF. Okay? All right, on to the last one here. I get to use a method of my choice, and I see something that's squared on both sides, simplified like that. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So 3x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 10. 10 is 2 times 5. Neither one is a perfect square. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. Okay, that gives me 3x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 10. The order doesn't matter, but you've got to keep the signs with the term. So then from here, we divide both sides by 3, and that's my answer. So it's x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 10 all over 3. All right. Determine if the parabola goes up or down. Okay. How do you know if it goes up? Is if a is greater than 0 or positive, and it goes down if a is less than 0 or it's negative. Okay. Y'all might have a different problem on here because what happens is I copied and pasted and forgot. So I put a different example if you want to change it, just so that you know and can remember. Because actually only a few people told me that in the study guide you had, these were exactly the same. So if you look here, a is equal to 2, that's a positive number, it's up. A here is equal to negative 4, so that of course means it would go down. So you just have to know what a is to answer that question. All right, x-intercepts and y-intercepts. Hope you don't mind. The easiest one is to do the y-intercept first, so I'm going to take care of that. Boom. That's your y-intercept right there. So y-intercept means x is 0, so it's 0, negative 18. Okay, the x-intercepts are a little more challenging, and that's when you're going to make y equal to 0. So 0 equals 2x squared plus 16x minus 18. Okay, I see a common factor here, so I'm going to divide everything by 2, leaving me with 0 equals x squared plus 8x minus 9. Okay, are there any factors of 9 that subtract to give me 8? There are. 0 equals x plus 9 and x minus 1. Okay, I went through that factoring quickly. If you need some help or review or help understanding, please pause and come see me. I'm trying to get through it a little quicker here. So you set each of those equal to 0. So x plus 9 equals 0, meaning x equals negative 9. And here x minus 1 equals 0, and that adding 1 gives you x equal 1. So your x-intercepts are negative 9, 0, and 1, 0. Do not write that in the blank because that's in a line, that's not a point, and our intercepts are points. Okay? If you want to just put negative 9 and 1 or negative 18, that's fine. Okay? All right, the vertex. How do we find the vertex for our parabolas? Okay, remember we talked about the x-coordinate of our vertex to find your vertex is negative b over 2a, and then you go and plug in that number into your equation. So y equals x squared plus 6 is a equals 1, b is 0, and c is 6. So my x-coordinate is negative b over 2a, so that's 0 over 2 times 1, which is 0. And then if I go plug it in, y equals 0 squared plus 6 is 6. So my vertex is the x-coordinate of 0 and the y-coordinate of 6. Okay, let's look at another one. A equals negative 1, b equals 10, c equals 8. So you do your x-coordinate first, negative b over 2 times negative 1. I'm putting those parentheses around it because it's negative. I have two negatives in here, so my answer is going to be positive, and 10 over 2 is 5. So we're going to go plug in y equals negative 5 squared. Now, I didn't put any parentheses because x is positive, so you need to put in your calculator just like that. Plus 10 times 5 plus 8. So that's negative 25 plus 50 plus 8, which is an answer of 33. So my vertex is at 5, comma 33. Okay, last page. All right, and we're going to graph, okay? So when we graphed, okay, the thing that I told you first again, you always have to find that vertex. So x equals, so let's go say a is 1, b is 4, and c is 3. So negative b, which is 4, over 2 times a gives me negative 2. And then I'm going to go plug in y equals, now it's negative this time, so when you plug in a negative, you need to put parentheses around it, plus 4 times negative 2 plus 3. And that gives you an answer of negative 1. So your vertex is negative 2, negative 1. So negative 2, negative 1 is right here. No, it's not. I didn't go negative. So what happens when y'all aren't here to tell me? All right, negative 2, negative 1 is right there. And then what I told you to do is look at what your A is, okay? A is 1, and if A is 1, I get to use these points, and I just have to count over and up or down, depending, because that was the other thing we talked about. Is this probably going up or down? It's going up. So I'm going to have 1, 1, 2, 4, because 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9. And I asked you to show me at least 7 points. So 1 is your vertex, and these on both sides of that vertex. So if I go over 1, I'm going up 1 on both sides. If I go over 2, I'm going up 4 on both sides. So I'm just counting. If I went over 3, I'm going up 9, which is right here on both sides. So let's see how that goes. Terrible. Still pretty bad. Not so bad. Okay, so there's your parabola. The other thing that I've suggested was look at where you cross the y-intercept, cross the y-axis. My y-intercept is 3, and if you look back up here at your equation, you should know that's your y-intercept. So that's a good way to check and say, hey, I did that problem correctly. All right, next one. Again, got to start off by finding your vertex. So A is -1, B is -6. Ooh, lots of negatives here. C is -5. Okay, so x equals the opposite of b over 2a. Okay, well, that's a positive and a negative, and a positive and a negative means I'm going to have a negative number, and 6 over 2 is 3. So my x-coordinate is -3, and I'm going to go plug that in. Again, whenever you plug in a negative, you got to put parentheses around it. Okay, so inside here is -3. Inside here is -3. So when you simplify that, you're going to get that y is equal to 4. So my vertex is -3, 4. And then the next thing you're going to do is go back and look, are you going up or down? And this tells me that I'm going to be going down. But the numbers don't change because it's still 1. So -3, +4 is right here. And I'm going to go down this time because a is negative. So I'm going to go over 1, down 1 in both directions. Over 2, down 4, and then over 3, down 9, which probably puts me right here. You kind of missed that dot. And then on the other side is going to be right here when I count. And so I graph it a little bit better than the first time, a little crooked there. Okay, so there's your parabola. Again, check your y-intercept. That's -5, and in my equation it's -5, so I'm good to go. All right, 2 more problems and we're done. Word problems. The profit that the vendor makes per day by selling X pretzels is given by the function blah blah. Find the number of pretzels that must be sold to maximize profit. Okay, so maximizing profit, you've got to decide it's always at your vertex. Okay, and your vertex, remember, is -b over 2a, and then plugging it back in, which is why we write f of -b over 2a. So it tells me I'm looking for x pretzels, but the maximum is going to occur at this vertex. So if I'm looking for x number of pretzels, that means all I have to do is go plug it in here. So a is -0.004, b is 3, that's supposed to be, yeah, that didn't come out right. b equals 3.2, and c equals -100. So x equals -b, -3.2 over 2 times a. All right, so put that in your calculator, and it will give you an answer of 400. So the question says find the number of pretzels. It's a word problem. We got to have a label, so it's going to be 400 pretzels. Okay, last one. Similar to what we did when you did your classwork on this, okay? She's shooting an arrow. Last time we were throwing a ball. Um, shoot an arrow upward into the air at a speed of 64 feet per second from a platform that is 30 feet high. The height of the arrow is given by this function. So this is the height by this function, and t is your time. So t is the time, h is your height. What is the maximum height? Remember, maximum is always at the vertex. So my vertex here, if you think about it, is the x coordinate is your time, and the y coordinate is the height of your arrow. So this time, I'm going to get x equals -b over 2 times a, 2 times a, excuse me, negative b over 2a. I'm sorry I didn't write that down. A is negative 16, B is 64, and C is 30. So negative 64 over 2 times negative 16. Make sure you put that in your calculator and can get the correct answer of 2. So that's the 2 seconds, but I need the height. So I'm going to go plug that in. H of 2 is negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2 plus 30. Okay, so you punch that in your calculator and you should check that and make sure that you get an answer of 94. So my answer is 94. What's the height? It's in feet, so it's 94 feet. And then we're done. So I hope you have come to ask me questions if you don't understand a problem or if you want to know how to get some more practice on a certain type of problem. I'll be happy to help you with that. Happy studying, and I will talk to you.